This essay seems hopelessly naive in the present social and political climate. Human societies seem ever more inward-looking, isolating, and selfish, while the political world is becoming conspicuously polarizing, authoritarian, and plutocratic. Both movements, likely arising at least in part from the intractable forces of overpopulation, the incomprehensible powers of several dominating technologies, and the darkly emergent fears of near-term failures of various social, economic, and environmental stabilities upon which our expected comforts and sense of well-being depend. Our engaging with the details of the world around us has increasingly narrowed in focus, moving away from the larger, more enveloping issues of environmental concerns, long-term economic fairness and stability, and the growing dangers as the failures of social justice drive people to extremes. Rather than consciously confront the totality of our actions on the biophysical systems that support complex life on the planet's surface and the direct but confusing consequences on our daily lives, great numbers of us retreat into the many narrow bigotries that are effective in shielding us from realizing uncompromising realities. What follows was written almost 2 decades ago, at a time when I felt there was some minimal hope that such ideas might serve as a seed planting in the fertile soil of the environmental concerns that were common at the time. The essay was published, was read by a few people, and replied to mostly favorably. It remains to my mind as true and essential as ever, and yet seems pathetically distant from what is considered proper subjects of thought today, as though one is trying to apply an enhancing, vitally preserving paint to a wall that is no longer there.
Extremism in the defense of survival. Extremism in the defense of liberty is no vice. Moderation in the pursuit of justice is no virtue. This was said by Barry Goldwater running for president in 1964. I remember hearing this shortly after it was spoken. I was immediately impressed with its rhetorical force and then by its stronger second taste, anxiety. My life was a, if not carefully, then somewhat successfully constructed house of cards. Work, savings, a bit of larceny, military deferments, class schedules, grad school applications, and a serious relationship all run through and through with the pretty ribbon of the plan. Extremism in the pursuit of anything sounded to me like danger. My roots were nourished in the bloody soil of World War II. Extremism was not unknown to me as a concept or actuality. In fact, my generation was never far from the Tiger Ride. Joe McCarthy, Russians, Cuba, the bomb. Further, growing up in the rural South, with the violent swings of hate, love, and confusion that were its daily bread, only spiced up the mix. And I was a young man wanting and planning a future. I reflect on these things as I am reprising Goldwater's lines, now with quite different goals, though they would have sounded the same to me back then with any intention. It was the embracing of extremism that frightened me most, not the insanity of Goldwater's worldview. I had seen people with crazy ideas, lots of them. It was the ones who were willing to go to the mat for those ideas that concerned me then, upsetting my plans and all. I actually didn't know that much about what there was to be extreme about, but could easily see that big changes might sort of randomly tumble down onto my little house of cards. Goldwater's Manichaean libertarian conservatism, informed out of a stew of Calvinism, individualism, and incipient xenophobia, appealed to a world of saintly Americans in mortal combat with the evil Ruskies. It was like a boil on humanity's butt. And it got us wrong as a species. We're not Calvinist, not individual. We are Manichaean and xenophobic, and other things that make getting out of our present mess problematic. But rather than appealing to our issues to energize our polarizing politics, we need to realize and mitigate them in the present world. I didn't understand these things back then. I only believed that extremism was dangerous. And yet today I see that only a particular extremism is all that can save the biophysical world we live in. Though I expect that extremism will be rejected now just as I rejected it. The political descendants of Goldwater have learned a similar lesson, though they are just as or more extreme in their narrow, crazy way. Today they begin every thought with, "I am just following the will of the people," as though they have no personal position and are moderate neutrals responding to the masses. Because of the largely unacknowledged extremes to which we humans have gone in our attempts to conquer nature over the last few thousand years, we must embrace new extremes, even greater extremes, if we are to return to living in biophysical reality. It is a simple fact available for all who will see, either with their own eyes or with the literature of science, that our changing of the Earth's surface and biophysical processes has a limited future. It is also clear that the economic systems that presently run our human existence are unfit for the problems that confront us. And finally, there are only a few number of years in which to make the shifts in attitude, understanding, and action required. Taken together, these facts do ultimately dictate extreme solutions. More and more people are saying this. Derek Jensen, Bill McKibben, and others. What Rachel Carson told the world in 1962, what Malthus understood in general form more than 200 years ago. And so here we are, once again, needing to do our chores at the last minute. What are the things we need to change? I have prepared my partial list. There are others that I may have missed, but for the most part, these would be a good start. I have written the list in the form of what we need to understand and believe as basis for responsible action. But I do understand that our most common expectations today create many objections to these ideas. These are the ideas and values that would reform our relationships with each other and with the world around us in ways that would allow us, along with all other species and ecosystem relationships, to continue on in some harmony. Number one, humans are animals that must integrate their behaviors with ecological processes, even and especially since we can get away with not paying attention to ecological reality for extended periods of time. As animals, we have behaviors characteristic of our species that, as long as we were sufficiently connected to the natural environment, functioned adaptively, but which today needs special attention to understand and to often mitigate as we confront the unnatural world we have created. Number two, nothing can be owned in the Blackstone sense of absolute domination of that which is called property. All claims of property and ownership are relationships in which one party is arbitrarily devalued based on power imbalances, always the result of the failures of full system integration. This doesn't mean that human political and economic systems don't have to address the use and distribution of space and material, but our ways of thinking about property must change from impunity of ownership to responsibility of stewardship. 3. Wealth accumulation is an aberrant behavior, a form of social pathology. Real wealth to be safe in reality and realize the damaging effect that excess has on both environment and social relations. The concepts of property and wealth accumulation are among the most dangerous ideas and behaviors of humans. 4. The measures of normal in the world must be based on biophysical reality of the non-human world, from places and processes that are uninfluenced by present human action. There are no normal or natural human behaviors, group or individual, of any scale remaining in the human repertoire. I wish you would read that statement a couple of times. Again, there are no normal or natural human behaviors, group or individual, of any scale remaining in the human repertoire. Normal, that is, the behaviors and feelings of specieshood, has to be rediscovered with focused intention. All references to normal and natural that depend on present behaviors are seriously suspect. Since most of the information we receive from the world is created by human agency to influence us in some way, we must become careful of what we subject ourselves to. Just as we have learned to eat with a mind to additives and nutrients, actively avoiding some and wisely selecting other foods, so we must be careful of our perceptual diet. 5. Humans are a community-based organism. Our individualism is only sensible in the context of community. It is ironic that, as we have come to depend on more and more others, some of us have taken to trying to see ourselves as more and more individual and independent, to the point of proclaiming absolute self-creation and individualism. The absurdity of this is obvious if you simply imagine the millions of people that we all depend on as supporting cast to study and store our history, teach us, create ideas and tools, grow food and gather materials, manufacture everything we use, and consume our products of work, ultimately to supply every material and social need we have. Needs which, over our history, our species supplied with their own hands within our immediate community and environment. 6. Our understandings of and relationships to health, illness, and death have become terribly distorted. A biological body is not evolved to continue functioning for much more than the average life expectancy of the species. The devotion to our own individualism gives the impression that there is something there to live on forever. The absolute certainty in the value of healing and defeating death in all cases, to the detriment of our species and the rest of life on earth, is perhaps our most defiant madness. My own squeamishness at this issue clearly informs me of its difficulty. How to address this issue needs to be made in the broadest-based open public discussion, and absolutely not left up to a plutocracy driven by their own, often sociopathic interests. 7. Our spiritual understandings and habits are the distorted products of the pre-scientific forest life, made over to serve the interests of priests, kings, and other authoritarians. We need to recognize what an incredible creation is our evolved and adapted capacities of imagination, what I am calling consciousness system of order, because this adaptation is not just imagination, but a completely new way of using information. This adaptation produces our whole cultural experience and our immense power to refine the details of material reality. But when removed from its essential environmental organizing principles, it has devastatingly dangerous power to distort reality. Our vital connections to the universe, which are fully based in our planet's biophysical reality, what we understand as spirituality, can and must grow in forms and in ways of being that bring together our most biological, pragmatic, creative, and expansive ethereal qualities. These all combine to suggest a life beginning by being raised in a loving, supporting community, being trained and educated in the realities of the situation in which one lives, an education formed around a combination of the best of factual material from the sciences, the best of epistemological understanding of reasoning, studies of human history and cultural experience, and all wrapped in the ideas of personal joy in living life well through the experience of it. The goal would be to gain the greatest joy and pleasure in life from the using up of the least amount of the world's resources. The greatest human consequence would be to have lived a life of fulfillment while only leaving footprints. The idea of leaving factories, vast highway systems, and all the other sources of our mountains of waste should create the greatest sense of horror and shame. As the body failed or as disease began its assault, a fulfilled person would not cling on to the hope of finally gaining some mythical happiness, of meeting some neurotic unmet need. Such a way of living would in no way be utopian. It would be filled with all of the difficulties that confront people today, less one. Human life would be integrated into biophysical reality and delimited by that reality the way it is for every other species. Human rates of change would be slowed to allow generational adaptations to our changes and allow the evolution of other species and integrating processes of ecosystems to keep up. These are extreme views and would require extreme changes in how we live. It is clear to me that most will reject them, even if realizing their necessity. But these ideas and others like them need to be planted in as many minds as possible, planted and nurtured. And as they wither in the sterile rain of our narrow political and social pragmatisms and outrages, then replanted for as long as we are able.